everybody. Mike Beer here with your DRF race of the day for Sunday, April 21st. It is the return of the Illinois Derby back on the schedule this year for the first time since 2017 at Hawthorne. It is for 3-year-olds. The purse is $200,000. They're going to go 9 furlongs, 2 turns here around the main track at Hawthorne. And let's take a look at this field for the Illinois Derby right now. Only 6 horses entered this year as this race tries to, make its way back to be a pretty important race on the calendar. We'll see if they can do it. They got a pretty modest field here, but you do have a couple of horses who have taken shots in Derby prep races earlier this year. It didn't really work out for them, and so they will take a step back here, looking for a little bit of class relief and still get a shot at a pretty significant purse here at $200,000. The 2 morning line favorites are 2 of those horses, though, sort of stepping back off the Derby trail here. The number 4 Woodcourt is the 5-2 morning line favorite. 2 starts back, this horse ran a pretty decent 4th in the Grade 2 Rebel at Oaklawn. Not a terrible performance there. He had a really tough post that day against a better field than this one. And I actually felt like he ran pretty well in that race. We'll see if he does wind up going favorite in here. It feels like he will vie for favoritism with the 1 Real Men Violin, another horse who ran pretty well in the Grade 2 Kentucky Jockey Club at the end of last year as a 2-year-old. Kenny McPeek brought this horse back and gave him a chance to get into the Kentucky Derby this year. 2 prep races down at the fairgrounds, and Real Men Violin just didn't run well at either of those races. Kind of felt like he was overmatched by some of the better 2-year-olds, so they take a step back in class here. And they found a much better spot for Real Men Violin. It feels like he could go favorite in here. And if he can rebound and get back to some of the races he was running as a 2-year-old, he could be pretty tough for this field to handle. We'll see if he still has anything left in the tank here, though, off of 2 very disappointing performances to kick off his 3-year-old campaign. Let's take a look at the Timeform U.S. pace projector before we break down these contenders here. Do expect this, assuming the number 6 Raventoown does decide to run here, after just running a week ago on this track and losing as a heavy favorite in a maiden race. If they decide to run him here, he's stretching out for the first time. He's got plenty of early speed. And I guess you'll see him on the early lead in this race. How far he can take them, whether he's good enough to really be a serious factor in this race is another question entirely. But he will be on the lead in this race if this is where he runs. Patriots Spirit is a horse who has sprint speed. He can keep up close for sure. Rogel is a horse who has really good tactical speed. They have those 2 horses sort of second and third tracking off of the early leader. I can see that being the case. I would just point out that the number 1 Real Men Violin, he's a very handy horse. They like to rate him. He's really good out of the gate, though, and then they just sort of take a hold of him and take him back. But he's very handy, and he moves up, tends in his good races, he moves up strongly into contention on the backstretch. This is a horse who's going to be within range at the pace call of this race, I do believe. And he's very good from the gate, so don't be surprised if he's right up close all the way around the track in this race. We'll start off the handicap, and then we'll talk about Real Men Violin, because in some ways he's the horse to beat in here. His last 2 races as a 2-year-old last year at Churchill Downs, they were both good performances. He got good trips in both of those races, but he ran, man. When he broke his maiden going the 1-turn mile on a sloppy track, he did get a good trip in that race. He managed to move up on the inside, get through, and then get out to the clear in the stretch to come after Track Phantom, a pretty good horse who was on a clear lead that day. And Real Men Violin just came and closed him down. He got a great trip and ride that day, but he also ran really well. They came back in the Kentucky Jockey Club out around 2 turns. Another really good trip and ride that day in that race, which had a contested pace in front of him. He did manage to get through on the inside in the stretch. As he was doing that, the winner, Honor Marie, who was a pretty good horse, was coming strongly down the outside. And Honor Marie just had the better finish that day. But Real Men Violin ran fine in that race. 89 Beyer, second best in a Grade 2. Again, they've run him twice this year. McPeak gave this horse a chance to be a Derby horse, and it just really hasn't worked out. If you go back to watch the Risen Star 2-back, it's another sloppy track. He's in against a good field. He did get sort of shuffled back, as they like to do with this horse. They rated him. They like to stay inside and try to come through on the rail in his races. And as they were doing that around the final turn of the Risen Star, he did get shuffled back in that race, and he lost some position. But after that, he did get room. He did get through at the top of the stretch. He just didn't have much of a finish in there, and he was nowhere at the end. It was a pretty disappointing performance, and he came back in the Louisiana Derby last time, and he ran even worse. He never even got into contention. He was eased off in the stretch. It was a very poor performance. You can understand watching those two races why Ken McPeak wants to take a step back with this horse and try to find an easier race for him. And they've done that in the Illinois Derby. This is a better spot for this horse. Expect him to rebound in here. I think he's going to be the favorite in here. I think he's the horse to beat in this race. The number 2 is Patriots Spirit, who's got something to prove as a distance horse. He is a stakes winner as a sprinter last year at Tampa in his final start as a 2-year-old. He ran pretty well in that race. It was not a fast race, but he ran pretty well there and got the job done. They came back. They did try to stretch him out in his second career start last year in the Grade 3 Iroquois, and he wound up getting really tired in that race and finishing far back. Maybe you want to be a little lenient of that performance because he did go really fast pace in that race. He opened up a clear lead up the backstretch. His rider was trying to slow him down. They really couldn't do it. He went way too fast and got tired. So I wouldn't hold that one against him too much. They came back in the Sam Davis, the only other route attempt for this horse, 2 starts back in February. And boy, he didn't run that well that day either, but he also didn't get a good trip in that race. He didn't break sharply from the gate, and he just wound up in a lot of traffic as that field made its way to the first hit. He got in between horses, bounced around between horses, shuffled back, and he was just in a bad spot, I thought, all the way around that race. And then he just didn't really do any running after that. I know it's another race you can give him an excuse for. He came back. They cut him back to sprint in the Hutchison last time. We'll take a look at the replay of that race right now. I don't know, man. It's a new buyer top for this horse. He runs fine, but as you can see through the stretch, he's just not good enough here. He can't get to the favorite Beeline on the lead. He's outfinished by a long shot to his outside in this race, and he's just going to settle for third in here. If you look at the short comment in your PPs, it sort of tries to suggest that he had some kind of tough trip in there. I didn't think that he did. I thought Gaffalione gave him a perfect trip in there, and this horse did his best with it, and he wasn't good enough. To me, he just has to improve. He's got to prove he's a distance horse anyway. And even if he is a distance horse, because it's kind of murky just based on the 2 route races so far, he's still going to have to take a step forward, I think, to win this race. The number 3 is Rigel. Brendan Walsh will ship this horse in. Very lightly raced, looking to take a step forward in here. What he does have going for him, the dirt debut back last November at Churchill Downs where he broke his maiden. He did win that race at 9 furlongs, this distance, so that's a good thing for him. It wasn't off the turf race. It wasn't a very fast race. He did have a perfect trip in there on a pretty slow pace, a race that was just dominated up front by him in the second place finisher of that race. He's run twice since then at Gulfstream. He's run fine in those races. He wasn't good enough either time, and he's just going to have to find a way to improve. We'll take a look at his most recent start. This is a 9 furlong allowance race down there at Gulfstream Park. He got a great trip in this race, sitting up, tracking the runner-up Merritt on the lead, and you can see through the stretch he's just not good enough. Conquest Warrior, who was a hot horse on the Derby Trail for about 5 seconds before he bombed in his first major test. He's easily best in this race. I'll give Rigel credit for not totally giving way through the stretcher, because at one point it looked like he might finish far behind, and he does stay on pretty gamely to the end there. He just wasn't good enough in that race, and he's going to have to improve to beat this field, but maybe he can do it. He's very lightly raced, and he's got some pedigree behind him. Brandon Walsh will put blinkers on for the Illinois Derby. Woodcourt is the morning line favorite, number 4. I thought he ran pretty well with that when he won 3 starts back. That's first off the claim for this trainer. He's back to dirt in that spot. He had a really fast pace in front of him to close into, however, and he got the right trip in that race and he got the job done. I thought that was a good performance, but things really went his way that day as far as pace and trip were concerned. He came back in his next start in that Rebel that we talked about before. He ran well in that race. He's a huge price. He has a tough post on the outside, and they just decided to send him. They took him back in the prior start and he caught pace. In the Rebel, they decided to send from the outside post, and he got caught on the outside, keeping up after the pace the entire way. I thought all in all, he ran pretty well. He wasn't good enough to go with those horses, but that was a pretty good performance. His most recent start back on the all-weather surface, and I realized that he handles that surface. He just kind of went evenly in there, but that was a good field. I wouldn't hold that one against him too much. I feel like he's a contender in this race. Whether I'd bet him as the favorite, that's another question entirely. I probably wouldn't, but I do think Woodcourt is a major player in here, someone you have to really strongly consider. The number 5 is Laree for trainer Al Stahl, another very lightly raced horse. I think there's something to recommend with this horse as well. They started him out in 2 route races on dirt as a 2-year-old last year. He wasn't around at the end of either of those races, but he also didn't get great trips either time. Those were 2 fast paces that he was on, and he was involved both times before he got tired in the stretch. So I wouldn't be too hard on him for those, and he did improve when they came back on turf over the winter. improved in each of those first 2 starts. And then I thought he ran really well when he won that race. 2 back, rained off onto a very wet main track at the Fairgrounds, but he ran well that day. That pace was solid. He kept up with it. He rolled up on those leaders around the turn and just won it going away. I thought that was a real step in the right direction for this horse. They ran him in the rush away on the all-weather last time at Turfway. He was never a factor in that race. I didn't love the trip that he pulled. You can go back and watch the replay there and draw your own conclusions. But he got one of those trips where he's in and among horses the entire way, and he just never got clear. Never saw daylight in that race. He just sort of stayed on through the stretch, unable to make up any ground, but he wasn't losing position either. To me, I just didn't like the position he was in there. And I'm not suggesting he was going to win or be like right there at the end, but that trip didn't work out for him. And so I just didn't really want to hold it against him. I liked his win 2 starts back. He seems like a horse who's heading in the right direction for a good trainer. And I like that they're stepping him up here to try tougher horses in this Illinois Derby, a race that just didn't come up that strong. The number 6 is Raventoown. Again, he should be on the lead in here. He's a 2-star maiden, a horse that they paid a lot of money for as a 2-year-old in training last year. He lost a duel in his debut. He missed a lot of time after that. And then they ran him back here at Hawthorne going 5.5 last Sunday. He made a clear stretch lead and he got tired and he got easily outfinished in that race at 3-5. Now, listen, maybe he just needed one. He was away for about, 9+ months there on the way into that race. So maybe he needed the start. That's still a pretty disappointing performance for this horse, who to me, he's just going to have to improve a lot. When I look at him, I get that he's, for a very dangerous trainer, he's going to be on the lead here. Maybe there aren't any great horses behind him. He's just got to improve way too much for my liking. And when I look at him, I just feel like his future might lie as a turf sprinter. That's kind of what his pedigree says. So we'll see. If they run him here, I don't really like him. I do understand, though, that he could have an effect on the outcome here if they just send him off to the early lead. That's the field for Sunday's renewal here of the Illinois Derby. Not a great one, but it's kind of a competitive race. It feels like you can make cases for a lot of different horses. I didn't think there was any real standout here, unless you just feel like Real Men Violin is going to get back to some of those 2-year-old races, and in that case, it'll be pretty tough to beat in here. Before we get the picks up, remember to subscribe to the DRF YouTube channel for all the race of the day action, stakes previews, and of course, Kentucky Derby coming up. We'll have a lot of content for you guys next week. So make sure to subscribe to the channel. Here are the picks for the Illinois Derby, Sunday's race of the day. I think Real Men Violin's the horse to beat. I'm going to take one small shot against him here. I thought the 5 Laree. I like the way he's trending. Don't like the trip that he got last time. Thought he ran well on dirt 2 starts back. I think this horse can move forward in this race, and I like his running style for this. I think he can get the right trip in here. Should be a fair price, even in a short field. So I'm going to try Laree on top in the Illinois Derby. It's your Sunday DRF race of the day. It goes as race number 8 at Hawthorne, approximate post time 6:56 Eastern time. Good luck.